Dear Mr. Tokayev, friends, colleagues, I greet all the participants and guests of the 25th St. Petersburg International Economic Forum. It is held during the hard times for the entire global community, when economy, markets, and even the principles of the global economic system are suffering a heavy blow. Many trade, industrial, supply chains disrupted by the pandemic are going through new challenges, and such key notions as the business reputation, the property and trust for the foreign currencies have been undermined. Unfortunately, they have been undermined by our Western partners, and it has been done intentionally to fulfill their ambitions, to preserve outdated geopolitical illusions. And today I would like to speak about our, and by our I mean the view, the opinion of the Russian leadership on the global economy. I'm going to speak in detail about how Russia is operating under these conditions and how Russia plans its development in this ever-changing situation. 1.5 years ago, when I spoke at the Davos Forum, I talked about that the unipolar world order is over, and that's something that I would like to start with, because we can't avoid it. It is over, despite all the attempts to preserve it with any means possible. And it is only natural, because changes are natural for history, because civilizational diversity of the planet, the richness of cultures is hard to combine with the political, economical, or other patterns, because it is not going to work. Because they are being imposed, those templates being imposed by one center, because this idea is flawed. When there is one strong country with a limited circle of other states that are allowed to be in this circle, and all the ideas of the foreign affairs, of trade turnover, is only interpreted within the interests of this one state. They only work one way. They only play in one direction, towards one goal. And such world will not be stable. The United States, after declaring victory in the Cold War, they declared themselves the messengers of the God on earth, who has no obligations but only interests. And these interests are to be considered sacred. And it's hard not to notice that in the recent decade on the planet we have new powerful centers, and each of them are developing their own political systems and civic societies. They are implementing their models of economic development, and they have the right to protect these models and to protect their sovereign interests. We are talking about objective things, about revolutionary tectonic shifts in the geopolitics and global economy, in technology, and the entire system of international relations, where we see an ever-growing role of the dynamically developing, promising countries and the regions whose interests cannot be ignored anymore. And these changes are fundamental, and they can't be turned back. And it would be a mistake to think that the time of the changes can be forgotten, that everything will go back to the way it was. It will never happen. But it seems that the ruling elites of certain Western countries, they still have this illusion. They do not want to see obvious things. They try to live in the shadow of the past. They still think that the domination of the Western politics is something that will never change, that is something eternal, but there is nothing is eternal. And our colleagues, they don't just deny the reality, they try to counter the path of history. They think of the things that are left in the past century. They are hostages of their illusions. I'm talking about the golden billion countries, and they think that everything else is their backyard, and they still treat them as their colonies. And the peoples who live there, they considered second-rate people because they think they are exclusive. If they are exclusive, then everyone else is the second-rate people. That's why they want to punish, they want to exert pressure on everyone who wants to stand out, who doesn't want to listen to them. And they boorishly try to impose their ideas about culture, about ethics, about history, that put under doubt the integrity and sovereignty of the states, put under threat their existence. Just remember Yugoslavia, Syria, Libya, and Iraq. If they can't put down those rebellious attitudes, they try to isolate them or to cancel them, as they say now. And they use all the tools: sports, Olympic movement, cancellation of culture, and masterpieces, because their authors were born in the wrong country. This is the nature of the current anti-Russian sentiments and those mad, crazy sanctions against Russia. And they are not only crazy, they are thoughtless. The amount of these sanctions and the rate at which they are being taken is unprecedented, because they want to crush the Russian economy by distorting, by disrupting supply chains, by trying to make Western companies to withdraw from the Russian market, to raise down Russian assets. They want to deal a heavy blow on the Russian financial system, but they failed. It is obvious that they have failed. It didn't happen. They didn't succeed. Russian businessmen, Russian government worked in a professional manner. Citizens showed their unity and responsible approach. Step by step, we are bringing more and more stability into the economic situation. First, we stabilized financial markets, banking system, and the trade system, and then we added more liquidity and more capital to help for the sustainable development of the companies and to create more jobs. The prospects, bad prognosis about the state of the Russian economy weren't turned true, and we know what was the reason of this propaganda campaign. Where did they get this ruble, 200 rubles for a dollar, and about our devastated economy? That was just a weapon in the propaganda war. It was a way to exert pressure on the Russian society and on business circles. By the way, some of our experts and pundits, they also said the same things. They thought that the Russian economy was going to collapse, and it is Russian currency, ruble, will be critically weakened. But the life itself proved them wrong. And I would like to say, I would like to emphasize, to continue to succeed, we have to be honest, we have to be realistic in our assessment, we have to be independent in our assessment, and we have to believe in our strength. It is very important. We are strong people, and we can cope with any challenges. Like our ancestors, we can resolve any task, and our millennial history is the testimony to that. 3 months. Three months after large-scale sanctions against us, we managed to deal with the inflation spike. Now the inflation is only 16.7%, and it continues to decrease. The economical situation has stabilized. State financial system is stable. Later, I will compare it with our situation with other regions. Yes, it's still too much. 16.7 is a lot. It's a big inflation. We need to deal with that, and we will deal with that. And we will succeed, I'm sure. After the first 5 months of this year, federal budget has the profit of 1.5 trillion rubles, and the consolidated budget with profit of 3.3 trillion rubles. And the federal budget profit in May is almost 0.5 trillion rubles, which is more, almost by 4 times than the year-by-year situation last May. We need to increase production to improve the situation at the domestic market. We need to restore the banking loan system. And we have taken special measures to improve the situation with the trade capital of the companies. And in all areas, businesses now have delay for the insurance payments. And at the same time, industrial companies have wider opportunities. Even in the third quarter of the year, they can use this delay. Basically, that's a zero-interest loan from the state. These insurance payments will not have to be paid at one moment. They can do it in equal shares in 12 months, starting from the next June. Then, since May, we have decreased the mortgage rate. Now it's 9%. And the program of the subsidized mortgage itself has been extended to the end of this year. And the objective is to help our citizens with the housing, to support the construction industry and other adjacent industries, because we have million jobs in there. After the growth in the spring, the interest in the Russian economies are being brought down. The central bank is bringing down the key interest rate. And that's why I think it is possible to decrease the subsidized mortgage rate. Now it is going to be 7%. But here is what I would like to draw your attention to. The duration of the program is the same until the end of this year. It means that those citizens who want to improve their housing conditions using this subsidy, they need to use it before the end of this year. The top amount of the loans is still the same, 12 million rubles for Moscow and St. Petersburg and 6 million rubles for the rest of the regions of the country. And I would like to add the following. We need to improve the accessibility towards these loans in the economy. In the near future, we are going to support the business activity from the budget, stimulating to the mechanisms of the market banking loans. This process has to be supported by us. To increase the opportunities for the earmarked funding, we have allocated 120 billion rubles from the Fund of the National Welfare, and this step is going to help with the additional loans for the earmarked projects of 3 billion rubles. Dear colleagues, I have already said that the economical blitzkrieg against Russia was doomed from the beginning, from the outset. And these sanction weapons, as you know, as practice of the recent years has shown, it double-edged. It deals the same amount of harm to those who impose those sanctions. And I'm only talking about the current consequences. We know that the leaders of the European countries, when they speak informally, they speak about quite worrisome prospects, because the sanctions could be introduced not only about Russia, but any countries that they don't like. And it could be used against any country, including the members of the European Union and their companies. They didn't do it, they haven't done it yet, but they have already dealt a heavy blow on their own economy with their own hands. We can see how the social situation has exacerbated in Europe and in the United States as well. And the commodities price are growing, food price is growing, energy price and the fuel price is growing, and the living standard is decreasing, and the competitiveness of their companies is decreasing. Experts say direct losses from the sanction fever of the European Union can exceed $14 billion. $400 billion. This is the reality that we're taking against common sense. And this is the burden that will be put on the population of Europe. The inflation is more than 20% in certain areas of the European Union. I have been talking about our inflation, but compare it with Europe, because they are not carrying out any special operations. And still, their inflation is growing, and it reached 20%. It has been the record inflation in the last 40 years. Yes, inflation in Russia is still in double digits area, but we have already indexed social payments and the pensions. We have increased the minimum wage and subsistence wage, thus protecting the most vulnerable people, and the high interest rates allowed to preserve savings of the people in the Russian banking system. Yes, of course, for the representatives of business, it's obvious. High interest rate is putting a lot of pressure on the economy. But for the people, in most cases, it's a good thing, it's a benefit. They brought back money to the banks using this high interest rate. And this is the biggest difference from the European Union, where the inflation is eating their savings and the current crisis becoming a burden for the most vulnerable people. The long-term consequences also is caused by the losses of the companies. They have lost Russian market. They are losing their global competitiveness and systemic decrease in the growth rate.
And this will happen in many years. This all leads to a worsening of many difficult problems that Europe faces. Of course, we have our own issues, but they keep pointing the fingers at us, while they have a lot of challenges they are facing themselves. I talked about this in Davos, and we are going to see a lot of inequality on the rise in Europe. This will further split their societies, and it's not just in terms of their economies, but in terms of the values that they hold. Of course, now we see these splits. They're trying to hide all of that, when you look at the democratic procedures in Europe and you see the politicians coming to power there, it's ridiculous. We see political parties that look alike, just replacing one another. There's nothing different between them, and their national interests are being ignored and disregarded. They are being removed from reality, and this will lead to a growth in populism and many radical movements. This will lead to drastic social change, to degradation, and in the longer term, to the change of their elites. You see that parties that protect traditional and national values are losing. But if they lose, who's going to protect these nations? So all these talks about admissible problems, or that they can deal with that, there's nothing true behind that. We see their elites following the rules of others and other people's games. They dance to other people's tunes. Also, we see that the worsening of the situation in the global economy is not something that started overnight. We've seen that for years. And what we see right now in the Russian economy and in the economy overall is not the result of the special military operation that pursued by Russia in the Donbass. In fact, we see that the surge in inflation in commodities markets and in other markets has started long before the events of February 24. And we have seen many years of irresponsible macroeconomic policy by the G7 countries that made that happen. They printed new money, they gave loans that could never be returned, and it all worsened with the start of the COVID-19 pandemic, and then in 2020, when both demand and supply were on the lowest were some of the lowest. And what does our special military operation in the Donbass have to do with that? They have no other ways out. So the governments of the Western nations just started to print money, more money, and they're covering the deficits in their economy by printing money. Over the past 2 years, the overall amount of money in the US rose by 38%. We've seen the same happen for the same amount of money be printed in decades, and now it just happened in a couple of years, in 1 year. And only a few countries in the world have statistics as that. Europe printed a lot of money. They have now 20% money, which is about 2.5 trillion euros. And recently I've been hearing a lot, more and more, about well, I don't like to talk about that, but we've all been hearing these words. It's Putin's inflation, and every time I hear that, I think to myself, who's going to believe that? Who's going to agree with that? Anyone who has a mind, who thinks, will not believe that Russia and our operation in the Donbass has anything to do with that. The current situation in the markets, the problem with food, with energy, with all those markets, is all the results of the systemic errors and mistakes by the bureaucrats in Washington and in Europe. They are the reason. Yes, let me say a few words about our operation. Of course, that had to do something with that, but the root of all those problems is the policies pursued by Western politicians, and they're trying to scapegoat us for their own mistakes. But anyone who has even a primary school education understands that just printing money will not solve your problems. Once you print them, what are you going to do with them? How are you going to deal with the repercussions? Then they started buying products made outside of the Western world, outside of the US. They started importing things from the rest of the world, but they didn't think about their own economies and about their own future, about their own people. And so the rest of the world was left with scraps. In 2018, the US imported about $200 billion worth of products every month, and now it's about $350 billion worth of goods a month, and it's a growth that is not secured by anything. It's just money that they're printing. They are not backed by anything. They give out money to their people and they import goods from third world countries. That's it. For many years, the US has provided food products for the rest of the world and for other markets, and it was a good thing to do. They had good farming traditions, they had good technologies, and they were a good example even for us. But now it has changed radically. And now the US is no longer an exporter of food. It now imports food. It prints money, and then it tries to gravitate, this commodity flows towards itself. And the same is happening in the EU. You know that when there's a surge in demand and combined with all the other issues, resulted in a surge of inflation, and now we have commodity goods, we have food, we have energy, and the prices of all those goods are rising. The balance between the export and the imports is skewed. Imports is now $17 billion more than the exports, and according to the UN, in this year, the index food by 17th of June was 50% more, and it was much more than May last year. And many are asking the question, why would you pay dollars or euros for those goods when these currencies are actually failing? As a result, we see the rise of an economy of real values and real assets, not just the currencies such as euros and dollars. the money that the West is printing is being devalued by 8% a year. And also, another problem is that they can be confiscated and stolen basically from you if the US or the Western world believes that you are wrong somehow in your foreign policy. So this is an important thing to consider if you're a government and you have a lot of dollars in your reserves. And this is an objective truth, and in the upcoming month, in the upcoming years, this process of converting your reserves to other currencies will begin. This is objectively going to happen. Other countries will do that. They will continue to buy goods, to buy energy, to buy food using other currencies, and this will result in even greater dollar inflation. As for Europe, there was another negative problem when it comes to prices, and it has to do with the failures in Europe's energy policies. They blindly believed in their renewable energy sources and that they could rely on them alone. And this has led to a massive rise in energy prices that started in the third quarter of last year. And this has started long before our special operation in the Donbass, and they are blaming us. They made their prices soar, and then they point the finger at us. This resulted in the rise of prices for many services and goods, and the rise of prices for fertilizers and potash fertilizers. And in 1 year, from February last year to February this year, prices rose by 70%. And there are no reasons for these price changes to happen. Entire enterprises are being blocked in their operations. Russian fertilizers are not allowed to be exported to Europe. And this is further moving Europe's economy down the drain. They are seeing less and less yields in their agriculture, which will mean there'll be less food, and food prices will rise even further, and this will result in famine in some of the world's least wealthy countries. Some of the world's poorest countries will suffer from that. And this has started not just yesterday, this has been going on for many months, and it is not Russia's fault, as many populists are saying, trying to blame Russia for everything bad that's happening in the global economy. Well, I mean, we probably would be flattered to hear that we are so great and so powerful that we can drive inflation to the sky in the US. Maybe we would be flattered to hear that, but that's simply not true. This has been happening. We've seen this developing for years. We see countries trying to solve their problems at the expense of others. They believe that just emitting money, printing money, and buying more goods from abroad is something that can help them, but they actually started humanitarian disasters in many parts of the world by pursuing these policies. This is the same colonial politics, just performed differently, through different means. It's the same colonialism we've seen for decades. Now, for Russia, our priority is to provide food and other products for the rest of the world, especially those countries that are poorest and require these products. Russia has secured its own food security, and we are going to increase the exports of grain, of agricultural goods, of fertilizers to the rest of the world. We are going to increase the exports of fertilizers by up to 50%. Especially, we're going to target those countries that risk facing famines, and I'm talking about African countries and the Middle East. In addition to that, there are other difficulties that have to do with what other actors do in the global politics. Of course, Russian grain, Russian fertilizers are being sanctioned, are being blocked by many of the Western countries. But then Americans realized that they made a mistake and they removed some of the sanctions. But the Europeans, I guess, are not so smart. They haven't done that before, and they haven't done that. And people understand that they have made a mistake, but they can no longer go back. They cannot lose face. And Russia, let me say that again, Russia is ready to contribute to balancing the situation in the global food markets. We welcome open dialogue about that. We welcome all the discussion that can take place within the UN with people who understand what's going to happen. We can talk about normalizing logistics, transportation, to increase the amount of Russian exports in food and fertilizers to the rest of the world. There's a lot of speculations going on about Ukrainian deliveries to the rest of the world. We're not blocking that. We haven't blocked their seaports in the Black Sea, and we are actually ready to provide security for their ships, for the ships that are going to transport their grain and other products. The U.S. Agricultural Agency believes there's 6 million tons of wheat. We believe there's 5 million tons of wheat, and also 7 million tons of maize. We also have other seaports, not just the Black Sea seaports, but also we have Belarus. We can move these products through Poland, through Romania, through other countries. It's not about us, it's not about our decisions, but about decision makers in Europe and in Ukraine. So there's a different danger. There's a danger that this grain will be traded for weapons for Ukraine. So, friends, the world is going through an era of change. Entire institutions crumble. Guarantees are no longer given. The West refuses to respect its obligations, and we can no longer expect it to respect its obligations or agree with anything about anything with it. So the decision to launch our special military operation was something that we were forced to do. They forced our hand. It was important, but we had to do that. It was difficult, but we, as a member of the UN, are a country that have the right to protect our sovereignty, to protect the rights of our people in the Donbass that have faced genocide for years, and full protection of the West. The West has pursued an anti-Russia scenario, an entire campaign trying to grab our lands, to fuel Ukraine with weapons and military advisors. They are doing this even now. They never really cared about the well-being of people living in these territories. They really do not care. But what they do care about is to create an entire platform in Eastern Europe to attack Russia. They put as much money as they could into these projects, and now our people and the militia in the Donbass and our army are fighting to defend our right for independent development as a country that is sovereign, that is independent, that has the right to make decisions for itself, that has its own culture, its own history, and that opposes any attempts from the outside to impose someone else's view of history or someone else's values on us. So all the missions we've set for ourselves and all the goals of the special military operation will be completed in full. And this will be possible thanks to the valor of our army, of our soldiers, and the support they receive from our people. We deeply understand that we are right in this matter. We want to build a strong and sovereign nation. We all share that feeling. Sovereignty in the 21st century is not something that can be partial or fragmentary. All elements of a nation's sovereignty are important. They all work together as a system. That is why we don't just want to protect our political sovereignty and our national identity, but we want to also improve and strengthen everything that has to do with our scientific, economic, technological independence and sovereignty. The entire idea, the framework of Western sanctions was based on the presumption that Russia is not sovereign when it comes to its economy, that it's critically vulnerable. They were so engaged in creating those myths about Russia being backwards, that Russia being underdeveloped, that they seem to have started to believe it themselves.
When they planned their economic blitzkrieg, they ignored actual facts. How the world has changed, how our country has changed in recent years. And these changes are the outcome of the work that we have been planning for. When we build macroeconomic structures, when we maintain our food security, when we implemented programs of import substitution, when we introduce our own payment system, and so on. Yes, sanctions have put a lot of difficult tasks in front of us. Number of enterprises still have problems with spare parts, and some technology is out of access for our companies. Supply chains are disrupted. But on the other hand, it opens new opportunities for us. And we say it a lot, but this is the truth, because it is an impetus to help the economy to think about, to implement its potential in full and to become sovereign in full. Yes, such an arduous task cannot be resolved overnight. We need to continue to work systematically, aimed at the future. And this is the only way for Russia to operate. And by implementing long-term roadmaps for various fields of the economy, we need to strengthen our industry and economy. And these challenges are going to make this plan stronger, but it's not going to redirect it. And today I would like to talk about the key principles on which we base the development of our country and our economy. First is openness. A sovereign state always look for equal partnership, always look for making its contribution to the global development. But those who are weak and dependable, they're looking for enemies. They are becoming xenophobic, or they are losing their independence, their autonomy, and they're following their sovereigns. And Russia, even though our Western friends, let's call them that, they dream about this. We will never self-isolate. More than that, we are expanding, and we will continue to expand cooperation with everyone interested, with those who want to work with us. And there are a lot of countries. I'm not going to list all of them, because this is the vast majority of people on Earth. I'm not going to list all these countries now, because you all know of them. I'm not going to say anything new if I remind you that everyone who wants to continue to work with Russia, they face open pressure from the United States and Europe. Sometimes they are being threatened directly, but this kind of blackmail doesn't mean a lot when we talk about the countries led by true leaders who understand clearly where they have their own national interests and where they have someone else's interests. And Russia is going to expand economical cooperation with such countries. They are going to implement joint projects with them. Yes, we will continue to work with the Western companies who, despite this unprecedented pressure, continue to work in the Russian market. There are such companies as well. And there is enough ground to continue to develop such cooperation. We will continue to develop independent payment system and to help the companies of our country to develop supply chains. We are going to develop transport pathways. We will increase the put through capacity of our railroads. We are going to develop our ports in the Arctic and in the East, and in the Sea of Azov and the Black Sea. They are going to be vital part of the North-South corridor that is going to create sustainable communication between Far East and the South Asia. And soon, we are going to increase the cargo flow along these pathways. But not only internationally we want to cooperate in economy, we want to develop other kind of cooperation in humanitarian, cultural, sport areas with our partners. And our company is going to be a responsible leader along all these fields. The second principle of our long-term development is the entrepreneurial freedom. Every private initiative aimed at the benefit of Russia will be supported at full and will be supported in its implementation. The pandemic and the current events reaffirmed how important it is to remain flexible and free in the economy. Private businesses under this duress, with any means possible to stop our development, our businesses prove that they can remain competitive at the global markets. And it also is happening because we have private businesses who are successful. We need to develop the economy based on the private businesses. We are going to decrease the administrative burden. In 2016 and 2018, we had the moratorium on the planned inspections of the small businesses, and it was extended until the end of the 2022. In 2020, this moratorium covered medium-sized businesses. More than that, 4 times the inspections were decreased, but we went even further. In this March, we stopped all the inspections for all the entrepreneurs, despite the scope of their businesses. The only exception is if they're a business of high risk of harming citizens or environment. And the number of the planned inspections in comparison with the last year decreased by 6 times. Why am I speaking about it now in so much detail? Because after we introduced this moratorium on inspections, the number of violations from the entrepreneurs. So it didn't increase, but decreased the number of violations. And it only goes to show how responsible Russian businesses are. It should be motivated. It should not be forced to stick to adhere to the norms. And we have every reason to believe that we need to make another important step, constant step, to renounce from having inspections throughout the entire range of Russian businesses that do not work in the field of the high-risk areas or high risk of inflicting any damage or any harm on people or on environment. Everyone understands that there is no need to inspect everyone. We need to think about the most high-risk areas, and we need to think about such reformations in the near months. And we have another sensitive topic to talk about, and it is a matter of our national security and economic sustainability, to bring to the minimum all kinds of loopholes for entrepreneurs. We are removing the blurred norms of legislation. If we talk about various economical crimes, in March we adopted a law where the tax crimes could only be persecuted by the Federal Tax Service, and there is no other way. Soon we are going to adopt a law on decreasing the term of the criminal activity, statute of limitation regarding the tax crimes. And overall, we need to be very careful, but at the same time, we need to think seriously about decriminalization on a number of economic misdemeanors. For example, working without accreditation or license, because currently it's a very sensitive matter because of the legitimate behavior of our Western partners who are not issuing such licenses. And cases like these, our state authorities should not sue our own businesses, our domestic businesses, because our businesses are not at fault. And you should understand what I'm talking about. If you own a small business, you should understand this. If your license has expired, your Western partners do not extended. So what should you do? Stop your business activities? No, but we need to keep it under control, but we should not stand in the way of developing such businesses. And we should about increasing the threshold of responsibility when custom fees and other fees are not being paid. Other than that, we haven't changed the parameters for the large and largest damage, because we need to bring this law up to date with the current realities. From 2016 up until now, we have accumulated about 50%, and these parameters have not changed since then, and we should change them, and we should reconsider the basis for putting entrepreneurs in prison or in jail. It's not a secret that quite often these norms are used when there is no objective need to use them. And when there is a probe into their activities, the companies have to hold their activities or they have to stop. Absolutely, and that's why we're losing jobs, and the company's reputation and its leaders are also harmed. And I would like to address law enforcement agencies. We should put an end to such practice. And I instruct the government and the Supreme Court to draft these amendments to the legislation. And please complete this work before October the 1st of 2022. Security Council was also briefed to review the situation when there is a probe, criminal probe, but it's not brought to the court, because there are a lot of cases like that in the recent years. And everyone understands what's the reason, because some probes are launched without enough ground, or because of the pressure on the company or in some individuals. And we are going to make additional decisions about that during the autumn to adjust the activities of the law enforcement agencies and to create modern, contemporary business environment should be carried out by the regional authorities. In this economic forum, we talk about those regions, we mention those regions who achieved the most headway, most progress in this area. And we have some changes in the top three leaders. Moscow and Petersburg, that are still the leaders this year, was joined by Moscow region. In comparison from the last year, from the place number 8, they reached the top 3. Among the leaders, we have Tula region, Nizhny Novgorod region, Sakhalin region, St. Petersburg, and Republic of Bashkortostan. And I would like to mention those regions who progressed the most. I'm talking about the Kurgan region. They raised by 36 tops, Perm and Altai region by 26 places, Ingushetia by 24 places, and the Ivanovo region that raised by 17 positions in these rankings. I would like to thank them, and I would like to congratulate our colleagues from these regions for the work that they have done. And of course, we should pay special attention as the federal government of regional municipal teams. We should support business initiatives by our citizens in small towns, in remote areas. We have such examples as stories of success. I'm talking about creating software, about creating environmentally friendly foodstuffs, about starting production all across the country, like internet platforms. And we need to create new opportunities. We need to introduce new ways of trade, including e-platforms, like I said before. We need to bring down all kinds of codes, supply codes, transport codes, and we also need to modernize the post offices of the country. And we should help the employees, self-employed people in our country to get additional skills and competences and expertise. And these measures aimed at small towns, at villages, at remote areas and territories. And I would like to mention them in the national project on developing small and medium-sized businesses. And today I would like to address the leaders, owners of the large-scale companies, to our top managers of such companies, your colleagues, your friends. The real strong success, the feeling of dignity and self-respect will only come when you connect your future future of your children with your motherland. We stay in contact with many of you for a long time now, and I know the sentiments of many owners and the managers of such companies, and I have heard it from you on many occasions that a business is much more than just getting profit, and this is true. But changing life around you, contributing to the development of your city, of your region, of your country is very important. Serving to your people, to society cannot be replaced with anything. This is the meaning of life. This is the meaning of working. And recent events is a testimony to what I have said before. It is better to work at home. Those who didn't heed to this clear message lost hundreds of millions or even billions in the West. So, this is safe haven for your capitals, alleged safe haven for your capitals. And I would like to say address to those who are attending this meeting or even absent, please do not step on these old brakes. Our country has a huge potential, and we have enough projects where you need to invest your efforts into. Invest into new jobs, into new businesses, in development of tourism, infrastructure, support schools, colleges, universities, healthcare, culture, sports. I know a lot of you are doing this already, but I would like to emphasize this one more time, because this is how Bakhrushin and Morozov were acting, Shukin, Churin and Galeev, Anapaevs and Matsievs, Mamontov, Tretyakov, Asanev, Dadashev, Giev, many Russian, Tatar, Buryat, Chechen, Dagestani, Yakut, Ossetian, Jew, Armenian, and other merchant families acted in the same manner. And they still bequeathed enough money for their descendants, and still they are now remembered by the modern society, by the today's Russia. And here's what I would like to emphasize. For the descendants, potential descendants, inheritance of this capital, I don't know what's more important, the money that they would inherit or the good name and the merits of their ancestors. Because no one is going to waste, no one is going to spend this money to buy some liquor. But something that the future generations will have. The good name will survive. The good name will remain with them. And that's something they are going to bring forward, bring into the future. That's something that will make them stronger, that will keep them going. And it is even better than money that they might inherit or any other assets or property that they might inherit. The third principle of our long-term development is the responsible and balanced macroeconomic policy. And this kind of policy allowed us to withstand this unprecedented sanctions pressure. But once again, this policy is important not only to face the current challenges, but also it is important for long-term plans. We are not going to follow the experience of the Western colleagues who are now disbalancing, introducing disbalance to their financial system. We want to plan our economy for many years to come. We need to bring away the pressure on the businesses. We need to reach the 4% inflation level in the future. I have started with inflation, and now I would like to mention this, 4%. This is our goal. This is our objective. I have already instructed the government to prepare the new budget projects. We should be predictable in our budget policies. We should create all necessary conditions to use them under the current economical situation. We need to do this to make the foundation of the economical growth stronger, because this is going to be the foundation for improving the well-being and welfare of our citizens. It's suicidal to invest into the foreign currencies, because obviously those people who do this, they are obviously suicidal. And it makes no sense to do that. But the main principle to spend money, just as much money as you earned, and no one's going to deny this because that's obvious. The fourth principle of our development is the social justice, the economic growth, and the industrial capabilities, and the scientific potential of the country. It all should have manifestation in society. This development should decrease the injustice. It should not deepen the injustice like it happens in certain other countries. And of course, we are not the best in resolving these kind of issues. We still have a lot of problems because decreasing poverty and injustice and equality should be resolved by improving the demand for the domestic production. We need to create jobs where they are necessary. We should prepare conditions for the potential growth in economy in the future. The real income of the people, decreasing the poverty, is the main manifestation of the efficiency of the state in overall. And despite all the objective difficulties, we need to achieve results already this year. And I have instructed the government to try to achieve this goal, because we are supporting the most vulnerable people, retirees, families with children, and those who found themselves in a dire situation. We are increasing indexing the pensions. This year we have indexed them twice by 10%, and we have also increased the minimum wage and sustenance wage, because it is the basis for a lot of other social payments, and it should also grow. It is going to concern directly the income of about 15 million people.
Over the past few years, we have built an entire system to support some of the poorest families with children. They can receive welfare from the government, from the state, since pregnancy to until the time that the child is age 17, reaches 17. And we have the problem of demographic waves that we are facing. And we've had over less than 100,000 new children born in 2021, which is less than in 2020, and this should be addressed. We need to make special policies to address that. The future of Russia is with families that have 2, 3, or more children. And to do that, we need more than just financial support. We need to realign the entire healthcare system, educational system, and all other areas of our life so that they encourage people to have more children. And we have a special social initiative implemented by our agencies, and in fall we will assess the results of their work. We try to improve the quality of life across all regions of Russia, to use best practices and best experience from across the world. Another principle, the fifth principle of our economy, is, of course, the development of infrastructure. We have already increased the investment in our transportation, and next year we will be rebuilding the bulk of our roads, automobile roads, and we are actively using infrastructure loans as an instrument that allows companies to receive 15-year loans at a low rate, and there's a great demand for it. Regions have many good projects waiting for launch, and they should not be postponed. We will continue to talk about what can be done with that, and we've discussed that yesterday as well. Today we can see that this instrument overall has been very effective. Now, how housing is an important area that is underinvested. We believe that it lacks 4.5 trillion rubles of funding. 40% of infrastructure needs to be repaired or changed, or rebuilt, and only 2% are completely rebuilt each year. I propose that we consolidate resources and start a massive program to restructure and reconstruct housing infrastructure, to rebuild homes. It is important to decrease the amount of the percentage of outdated infrastructure or dilapidated infrastructure, and this will going to be discussed at the council next week. Also, I propose to launch projects in smaller cities to increase the welfare and well-being of people living there. I propose we allocate $20 billion to that next year. 20 trillion, and additional funds will be sent to rebuild and help the cities of the Far East to improve the housing there, and we have special limits and special programs for that. Another priority for us is to develop agricultural territories. People living in agricultural areas are people who provide us with food, and they must live in comfortable environments and in decent conditions. And so I would like to ask the government to earmark additional funds to fund the targeted program. It could be funded by actually introducing new export duties for the agricultural products that we are exporting. Also, I'd like to expand various programs to improve cultural facilities in smaller towns and agricultural areas such as theaters, cultural centers, etc. I think I would like to allocate $6 billion in the upcoming 2 years for that goal. Speaking of culture, there's an example I'd like to give to you. Recently, I gave medals, the heroes, labor heroes, and one of the persons I awarded was from Yakutia, Vladimir Mikhailovich, and he asked me to help rebuild the home of culture, as they call it, in his town, and of course we will help him with that. I'd like to also sidetrack you for something. There is a issue of in summer, people like to go on vacations and they like to visit parks and various other picturesque places in our country. It is important that our businesses, that our mayors, that our city governments know what can be built where and where can it be built, where tourism can be developed and where tourist infrastructure can create risks for more vulnerable ecosystems. So we would like to propose a special bill that will clarify the regulations when it comes to constructing tourist infrastructure. There's another thing I'd like to add. All the decisions that we make here must be calculated, and we have to be very careful when addressing such issues. Now, another problem is, of course, another issue that we have is preserving the Lake Baikal, and this must be a lake that is to be protected as one of the greatest lakes in Russia and in the world, and the cities surrounding the town surrounding that lake must become tourist vistas, and they need to attract best technologies, greenest technologies, and we will continue to develop green and ecologically friendly technologies there in order to decrease the amount of waste produced by industrial centers and other harmful emissions as well. We'd like to establish more green products, more closed circuits projects, and this is something I've talked even a year ago, and there's a simple principle that unites all of these aspects. This is our technological sovereignty. We need to create a system that in its critical components is independent from Western institutions, and we need to realign all areas of our lives towards a new level of technology, a new level of scientific progress, so that we don't just use other people's products and services, but we have the keys to create these products and services ourselves. For the past few years, we have been doing a lot in the area of import substitution. We have done a lot in healthcare, in medical production of medicine, in the military sphere, and in other spheres. But import substitution is not a cure for all. It cannot resolve all of our problems. If we just try to replace others' people's products, other nations' products with just copies, we will continue to be runners up. We'll be constantly catching up with others, but we need to be on the cutting edge. We need to create our own best products that will be state-of-the-art technologies. And for example, Sergei Korolev, the great Russian scientist, did not just look at technologies produced by other scientists from other countries. No, he established his own systems, and he laid the foundation for cosmonautics and space travel for decades ahead of him. And the same is something we should do today. So our research and development bureaus are following the same principle. That is why we have hypersonic weapons, for example, which no other country in the world possesses. So we are leading in nuclear technologies. We have a nuclear icebreaker fleet, and we also have our specialists in the area of big data and AI are some of the best in the world. So these are technologies that will define not just our development, but the future of the entire 21st century. And so we will continue to discuss that at the upcoming Strategic Development Council. There are many issues to be discussed there, especially when it comes to managerial decisions and decision-making. When it comes to transferring technologies into the real economy, when it comes to providing funding to high-tech technologies, high-tech companies, and we will continue to address the digitization of various industries. Of course, we cannot and should not try to produce everything that is possible to produce, but we need to be able to produce the critical products and services and infrastructure so that we're independent. And this is exactly what we did when we created vaccines, the COVID-19 vaccines. And for example, now we have launched production of many other products and services. For example, after the companies that worked with Kamaz, foreign companies, after they left our markets in a hurry, we've had Russian companies replace them, and in fact they have been very effective. We have the Mir payment system and credit card system, payment card system, which has been very successful in replacing Visa and MasterCard, and has gained a lot of recognition in Russia and abroad. In Petersburg, the tractor factory was actually helped after Western companies that used to invest in it left. It also received support from Russian companies and Russian producers, and they have been very successful again. And we have many examples like that, many success stories, and I'm positive that we will see many more such success stories. Russia has the specialists, Russia has the technologies, and we have people that are in demand. We have companies, we have production that is cutting edge, that is also in demand. And right now our goal is to establish all the logistics and all the necessary environments for these companies to be truly successful. So I would like to ask the government to provide by fall this year a detailed plan of supporting various actors of the economy and entrepreneurs. So these people need to be able to receive loans at no more than at a rate of no more than 77%. And the loan has to be for 10 years at least. So we've discussed all of those issues with our economic specialists. They all agree that this must be done. Next, we need to have lower taxes in various clusters of the economy. Next, we need to provide these companies with an entire package of orders they're going to receive after they start operations. We need to provide them subsidies. I'm sure that they will need subsidies to be successful in the market. We need to discuss that later. Next, simplified management, or as fewer inspections as possible, so that these companies can operate at a relaxed taxation monitoring regime. We need to have a demand for the products that they're going to produce. And so this regime, this is something that we need to have ready by January 1st, 2023. So the existing areas of industrial growth and the ones that we are going to build must engage into its orbit smaller businesses. And these smaller enterprises and entrepreneurs must see the promise, how promising these larger companies are. And I'd like to ask the MSP company and our other companies to start cooperating with smaller and medium-sized businesses, so that for years ahead we will guarantee demand for the products and the goods produced by these companies, so that providers, suppliers can actually adapt to each order they receive beforehand. We have already reduced the amount of inspections and procedures that these entrepreneurs have to face, but there's still much to be done. For example, the production of industrial areas from scratch still requires many years, but buying territories and buying these sites is still shackled by the fact that they are very expensive, and taxation is too high, and the rates are too high. So we would like to introduce something we call an industrial mortgage, which will be less than 5%. The rate will be 5% a year, and this way companies will be allowed to have the money, have the funds to buy the industrial equipment and the sites to build their own industrial production at. Friends, the speed of change that we see in the world and the economic relations is rising. We see that many people are turning away from globalization to a multipolar world order. Of course, the creation of this new world order is a laborious process, and we're going to face many challenges on the road ahead, many factors that are still unforeseen. We cannot forecast them, but it's clear that it is the powerful sovereign state that will guide this new world order. And these will be the nations that are not moving along a trajectory designed by someone else. This will be individual, independent, powerful nations. They will have a word to say in this nascent new world order. Other nations will stay on the curve of history, and we need to feel the zeitgeist, we need to see what's happening, and so we need to adapt, and we need to show our national will and decisiveness. Russia is entering a decisive stage, as an independent country, and we will certainly use the colossal opportunities we have provided by this spirit of this time to become even stronger. Thank you for your attention.